As it's already been reported throughout the day, I, as a public official, have had a private event in my life that I need to share. I had a consensual relationship with a member of my security detail, and I am deeply sorry for that. And I am embarrassed, and I am sad, and I am so sorry for all the pain that I have caused my family and his family. And I know that God will forgive me, but that Nashville doesn't have to. And I hope that I can earn their trust, and I can earn your trust back, and that you will forgive me. I know that there have been several questions today about some of the finances, the travel, and the overtime. Let me just take a moment and talk about that, and then I'm going to take all your questions. As a mayor, one of the things that is part of what you have is detail, and detail is with you all the time. I think that you can look at my schedule since the time I've come into office. I have had a very aggressive schedule. I'm out in the community, and that's reflected with the overtime that has been billed to my detail. The police set the policy for the kind of detail coverage that a mayor gets, and I have been the recipient of that. I have taken trips that have also included detail. Those trips have been always for business. They have included trips to conferences. They have included trips to best practices, looking at transit, looking at soccer stadiums, and every single one of them was a business-related trip. Now, once again, I just want to say how sorry I am, how embarrassed I am that I did this, how sorry I am for the pain that I have caused my family and my husband. And now I'm happy to take your questions.
Gary, the overtime under that Sergeant Forrest had accrued under Carl Dean, it almost doubled under you. Is that all from business-related travel? How did it nearly double?
So as I said, when I came into office, I set a very aggressive schedule because I wanted to be out in the community and be with people and be at events. And I'm happy to share, I think we've already disclosed all of the records for my schedule, and I think you will see that that lines right up with the overtime because we were out busy working.
Mayor, last week you announced a proposal to cut millions of dollars to Metro departments, dipping into a city savings account, and instituting a hiring freeze to save Nashville General Hospital. You're also asking Metro taxpayers to give up more of their money to pay for the proposed transit plan. So can you understand why some may be watching tonight thinking that it's hypocritical of you to be asking Metro departments and Metro taxpayers to be giving up more money while you're spending time with someone who's on the city payroll that you're having an affair with?
What I did was wrong. I should not have had an affair. I would have had the security detail with me as part of my mayor responsibilities, regardless of who that person was, but I should not have had that affair.
Yeah,
Was it possible that you could have, if once the affair started, maybe relieve him of his duties or ask him to resign because you caused yourself so much problems by having this affair while he was still on duty? I mean, you understand now all these normal things like a trip to blank now get scrutiny like it'll never get before. Every single trip, every meal, every hotel bill.
It was wrong, and I should have gone to the chief, and I should have said what was happening, and I should have made a better decision about that. But everything that Sergeant Forrest did in the course of his responsibility to be my detail was business-related.
Mayor, when did it start and how was it discovered?
It started several months after I came into my administration.
How was it discovered?
The conversations between our spouses and some personal conversations, I think that I would rather leave those to be conversations that he's having with his spouse and the healing that I need to do with mine.
Can you say when it ended?
Yes, it's over.
Can you say when?
Yes, it's over.
When did it end?
It's over.
How
Well-
did it end?
It ended with saying it's over.
Why come forward now, not a week ago, not a month ago, earlier on?
I think as a public official and with the conversations that were starting to swirl, it was clear that our personal lives were going to become public, and we had made a serious mistake, and we needed to step up and we needed to own it, and that's what I'm doing today.
People who are your friends, I mean, allies, absolutely. People today were speculating that you were going to resign tonight, and then others said she's going to, like, try to weather this storm. Did you think about resigning over this?
No. This is a very bad day, and I'm going to have several more bad days. But this is not my worst day. And I will tell you that I know the difference between a mistake, and I made a serious mistake. But this is not a tragedy. This is a mistake.
What do you say to people who say that you should resign following this event?
I will look forward to continuing to work for Nashvillians. We have an agenda in this office that is robust, and we have been focused on transit and housing and education, and we'll continue to do that.
How difficult is it going to be going on with this agenda after this?
I think that today I'm here to admit that I have personal failings. I am only human, and I didn't stop being a human when I became the mayor. And I believe that as the mayor, I've been able to do a lot of really good things in this city with the Metro Council and with the people I work with. And I have disappointed them terribly. And that is my biggest sadness today.
Mayor, you're anticipating an investigation, of course, because that's when something like this happens and money's involved. What are your thoughts on that, and how open are you going to be about being investigated?
We will give any records over to anybody that would like them, transparency in any investigation.
You mentioned conversations swirling that your private life was about to become public. Do you think, had those conversations not surfaced, that this relationship would be continuing today?
No.
How are you and your husband today? Has he forgiven you?
Yeah. I am married to somebody who has always been supportive of me, we've gone through a lot together, and we've been married a long time. And Bruce and I are having conversations because we have to come together and find a way to heal. And that's on me. And I'm working very hard to make that happen.
We've heard a lot about people in power having relationships with employees, subordinates. You're the head of the city. This gentleman worked for the police department. It was maybe inappropriate, but was it inappropriate on a professional level as well as a personal level?
It was inappropriate for us to have this affair, but I think that when we talk about the Me Too movement and those conversations, I think I want to be clear, because I don't want to muddy the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement is about women who have been sexually harassed and economically disadvantaged for hundreds of years. This is about two middle-aged, consenting adults who had feelings for each other and were human and had failings.
Let me ask you this then, though, even though you're right, of course, but the pattern continues, the subordinate resigns and the boss stays.
Well, I will tell you that you can talk to Sergeant Forrest about why he decided to retire. That would be a question for him and his family.
Mayor, you talked about winning back the trust of voters, I presume, the people you work with. How do you do that now?
Well, I think I do that, first of all, by asking for forgiveness. I'm deeply sorry, and I made a mistake. And I am human, and I have human failings. As I said, I didn't stop being human when I became the mayor. And I deeply regret this. And my hope is that as we continue to do the good work of the city, that the Nashvillians who have always expected me to do what's best for our city will continue to have that expectation.
Mayor, Robert, of course, he resigned, kind of like your behavior unbecoming an officer. Aren't you claiming a women's privilege here by not taking responsibility and not doing the stand-up thing and resigning?
Actually, he didn't. He retired.
Well, that's equivalent. Aren't you giving women rights, a bad smell here because you're not doing what a man would be expected to do in your position.
I think I'm going to go back and say this again. This is a consensual relationship between two middle-aged people who had feelings for each other. And what we did was wrong. I'm not running away from that. But this is not the Me Too movement. This is not about sexually harassing and economically disadvantaging women, which is what that's about.
But if the roles were reversed, wouldn't we all be clamoring for him to resign?
I'm not going to deal with hypotheticals. I'm going to talk about my specific issue, and I was wrong.
So my question again is, aren't you doing a double standard here? Aren't you claiming a right, an extra right for women who can do stuff and be forgiven, if you want to use those words, but essentially not being held responsible, whereas a man would?
I'm being held responsible. I'm right here, right now, asking for forgiveness and taking full responsibility for exactly what I did.
Mayor, have you talked to the police chief?
Yes.
And tell us about that conversation.
I informed the police chief of this. He had no idea, and we had a frank conversation about that.
It was my understanding the chief was originally going to be here tonight at this. Do you have any knowledge of that, or why?
I don't. I don't.
Mayor Barry, did any of your staff know about this before today?
No. I mean, they'd know over the last couple of days because I've told them, but they didn't know before.
Some council members I've spoken to have suggested they might look into this as a body regarding the expenses, OT, travel. Are you comfortable with that? I mean, are you comfortable with an investigation from other people?
Absolutely. Our records are available for anybody to look at, and absolutely.
Do you want to restate, very important, are you saying nothing at all illegal happened during the course of this relationship?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There were no policies that were violated. There was nothing illegal happened. The records will absolutely show that the expenses matched with the overtime expected, but I welcome anybody to take a look at that.
Ma'am, did you personally approve his overtime?
No, ma'am.
How was that accounted for?
That was all through the police department.
Can you tell us about your new head of security?
Sure. Yes, I have a new head of security. His name is Chris West.
When you say on these various trips that they were all conducted for city business, can you say that all the conduct was city business there, or was the relationship you had with Sergeant Forrest, was some of that on play during these trips?
I've had an affair with Sergeant Forrest over the last couple of years, but every trip that we took was business related and was absolutely about being at a conference or learning about what other cities were doing or showcasing the good works that Nashville does.
When you went on these trips, Mayor, did other members of your security detail go with you, or was it just you and Sergeant Forrest?
On some occasions they did. I traveled with staff on multiple occasions along with Sergeant Forrest, and we were happy to provide all those details to you.
Sergeant Forrest submitted his 2-week notice on January 17th. You're saying he would have been doing that regardless of whether this came out?
I'm saying that if you want to know about the timing of his retirement, I think that's a question best asked to him.
With so much left to be determined on the transit plan, really fine-tuning the engineering and stuff, there's still a lot of trust the public has to have in you and your administration to vote for this. Are you worried that this jeopardizes that?
What I'm worried about is making sure that people know that I'm deeply sorry about this. And we have an agenda. It's an aggressive agenda, and that hasn't changed. I'm not the only one who is working on all of this. And clearly, I am out there every day working on this, but so are so many other people. I mean, that's what this is about. This is about all these people who work so hard every day for Nashville.
The council still hasn't voted to put it on the May 1st ballot. Would there be any consideration to defer that and maybe look towards one of the latter two elections of this later in 2018?
I think we have done the hard work, and the council has been right there with us on finding a way to get this on the ballot on May 1st. That's the plan, and we're not deviating from that.
I know a lot of these questions seem personal, but, they have to be asked because
Sure.
it's happened, Pandora's box was opened. Was there any personal engagement while Sergeant Forrest was on duty?
No.
Mayor, I understand that his retirement has to be accepted by the benefit board, And that there's the opportunity for the chief to have input and say, no, he would rather have him fired. Did you and the chief talk about that?
The chief is in support of his retirement and doesn't see this being an issue at all.
Is there going to be an internal affairs investigation in the police department?
Not that I know of.
Did anybody know about this and cover it up?
No,
Cover it up.
no,
Ma'am, were you threatened or blackmailed in any way?
no.
When you guys went out of town on business and you had the security with you, was there any time that your security was not considered working?
I guess when he was off the clock and
So there are times that you were out of town that you did not have security.
when I would travel personally for my own personal, with my family,
No,
yes.
When you were on business with Metro and the security team was with you, like when you were asleep, does that mean that they were not on the clock?
I mean, I guess they were asleep too. So no, they wouldn't have been billing for hours that would have been that. But we're happy to provide all of the detailed records so you can see exactly what the overtime was and exactly how that matched up to the trips. Okay, thank you all. I appreciate you.
So Mayor Megan Barry has concluded her news conference at the Metro Courthouse, a remarkable news conference. That's obviously what we're going to be covering tonight on OpenLine. Happy to have with us Phil Williams, who did the original interview, the initial television interview today. Thank you, Phil, for being with us.
Absolutely.
So what did you think, what you heard just now?
Well, one thing you have to say is she was very much on message because she sat down for an on-camera interview with me earlier today, and you heard a lot of the same answers almost verbatim coming out of her mouth. So, you know, she had been preparing for this interview for a few days, and so obviously she had been working on exactly what she wanted to say.
That struck me in watching that news conference and watching your story at 6 o'clock and at 5 o'clock. It did seem like she had a lot of the same answers.
That's right.
And so she was prepared.
She's a very polished politician. And so you saw that preparation coming through in the interview with me and in the news conference this evening.
You had been working on this for a while. This didn't happen this morning,
No.
right? So go through as best you can how this came about, how long you've been working on it.
Late last week I got a tip about the relationship. And again, you know, my primary concern on this is not who is sleeping with whom. My primary concern is how are taxpayer dollars being used. And so last Friday, I filed a couple of public records requests on that very point, looking at his overtime, looking at his travel, just to see how this, you know, at that point, an allegation of an affair, how that meshed with the use of taxpayer money. So again, my focus was on taxpayer money and how taxpayer money had been used.
You get a tip about an affair, and that's not what you are going to focus on. It becomes more news when we talk about, like you said, the use of taxpayer dollars. So this is a person in her security detail. He was in the security detail under Carl Dean and Bill Purcell, and then he came into detail under her. And you started looking at the overtime. And that there were some things, and travel, and there were some things that kind of stood out. Is that right?
Exactly, because his overtime dramatically increased once she became mayor. Under the last 3 fiscal years where he was protecting Carl Dean, his overtime averaged about $33,000, $34,000 a year. Under Mayor Barry, his overtime in the first fiscal year jumped to about almost $60,000. In the next fiscal year, it jumped to more than $75,000. And it was on track this fiscal year to be as much.
$75,000 in overtime. So we saw her answer.
And with his base salary, that brought his total compensation for that fiscal year to $157,000, which is pretty darn good money for a police sergeant.
Absolutely. And so you asked her about that. She was certainly asked about that in that news conference that we just saw. And the question is, will people be satisfied with that answer? And we put that out there, and people can make that decision. All right, what we want to do is encourage you to call in with your questions, comments. We'll both be here taking your questions and comments. There's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Give us a call. We're going to take a break. Be back right after this.